Hi, I'm Kieren.
And I'm Riku.
Welcome to Artificially Ever After
Short Stuff. Cool. So what we're talking about today, Kieren?
Yeah, so we're going to be trying to answer this question around how can we trust AI and specifically chatbots and LLMs. And we're going to be focusing on this thing which you may have come across called open sourcing. And we're going to dive into exactly what that means shortly. But why are we talking about this now, Ricky? Why do we need to think about trust today?
Well, we're in an age where people, and maybe myself included, are doing the following things. So they're using AI for therapy. They're going to these chatbots like ChatGPT and asking it for all sorts of advice on their relationships. Healthcare is a big one, especially in countries where healthcare is expensive. Fitness, people's emails in there, and lots of sensitive information.
Kind of every aspect of people's lives if they're using them daily, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think people tell GPT anything, and we actually had Sam Altman say in an interview something along the lines of, people talk about the most personal shit in their lives, ChatGPT. So if that doesn't convince you that people using it, then I'm not sure.
And also one thing to note is that OpenAI, along with some of the other companies, but mainly OpenAI, were pushing the fact that they want to really focus on memory in their models, and they want them to really get to know you as a person. So that means that data is no longer just kind of being used for the particular response you're getting there and then. It's helping to make this AI understand you over time.
Yeah, when I use it and it says memory update, I'm like, what did I just tell it?
What's it say? You want to know what it said exactly, what did it save?
But but these conversations, if they were with a human, they would be maybe protected, but it's not really the case with these language models, is it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, again, on this same podcast that Sam Altman went on, he basically said that, right now, if you talk to a therapist, for example, or a lawyer or a doctor about the same type of problems you may ask ChatGPT about, there's legal protection and privilege between those two individuals. So you've got doctor-patient privilege, attorney-client privilege. And he basically said, we've not figured that out yet for when you talk to ChatGPT and these chatbots. So there's no protection there. And he also said, if you go and talk to ChatGPT about your most sensitive stuff, and then there's a lawsuit, for example, we, being OpenAI, could be required to reproduce that text that you told it. And he basically said, quote, I think that's very screwed up. So he thinks that's a really concerning problem. And I think he's pushing for policy and law that can help fix that, but it's by no means in place yet. And
it sounds like it's not keeping up.
Yeah, exactly. The law is definitely lagging behind. So I think we all need to really start asking ourselves these questions now when we're talking maybe a bit more personally to ChatGPT or the other models as to whether you're comfortable with that conversation or that information getting out or someone outside of just the interaction with ChatGPT reading those messages. This is kind of on this element of trust with these models, with these companies, what they do with your data. And so much of society and the things that we do rely on trust and trust between different humans, the people that kind of grow and farm your food or people that design the medicines that treat you. We just inherently trust those other people, those other individuals. Now, though, we're seeing AI kind of replacing jobs in some settings or massively assisting and aiding humans in making their decisions. So it's this very large new entity now that we need to figure out how we trust it and in what ways and to what extent do we trust it. And what's really interesting is that there seems to be very big distrust with big tech companies in particular, even though we're discussing all these very personal topics and divulging all this private information with their products and their software. We don't necessarily trust the companies themselves, which is a bit of a sort of paradox there. But there was a Office of National Statistics survey in the UK at the start of 2025, which asked adults to what extent they trust big tech companies, where 0 is not at all and 10 is completely. 47% were between 0 and 4. Around 1 in 8 adults, so 13%, said 0, so not at all do they trust these companies, while a quarter said between 6 and 10. And younger adults seem to trust the big tech companies a little bit more than older adults, which is maybe not too surprising. But the thing is, like I was saying, we're all using these tools now. They're becoming massively integrated into our day-to-day lives. So we need to find out a way to trust them and trust the companies making them and push for them to do things which facilitate a mutual trust.
Yeah, and one solution that we're going to talk about today about how to build trust is through transparency. And I think a good example, just to link back to what you were saying about the people that make your food, we see that on foodstuffs in shops that they're required to actually put the ingredients that made the food on the back of the packet, right?
And
So
nutrition labels,
like, I know myself, before I buy a sandwich, I always check like what's on the back. Is there anything that's probably not
how
good
many
for
ingredients,
me? And
that's a
through
really
that
good point.
trust, and if there's all healthy stuff, then I'll buy the food. So and in the same way, we need, if we have this for AI systems, maybe we can trust them more and make use of all the ways they can positively influence us.
Yeah, their ingredients, what was used to make them.
Yeah, exactly. And what this looks like with technology, it tends to be this term called open sourcing. So Kieren, do you have a definition for this?
So yeah, in the most general sense, open sourcing refers to a process or a product whose design or blueprint is made publicly accessible, allowing anyone to view it, modify it, or redistribute it as well. And the term originally came from software development, so computer code and software, but its core principles around like transparency, collaboration, and also peer review, so other people kind of looking at it and saying how they feel, now applies to many fields, so kind of journalism as well. But today we're going to be talking specifically about what it means in the context of AI and specifically LLMs, aren't we?
Yes, and what we see is there's actually a lot of people that understand the specific definition of open source get a bit annoyed at these AI companies who claim to be open sourcing their models. So we're going to break down the different ways these AI companies are actually open sourcing, even though...
And how open.
Yes, exactly. I think that's the core question, is how open. So at one level, and the one that's quite common, is called open weight. And this is talking about, if you think of the language model as a brain, then open weight means you can release the number of neurons in that brain, where they're structured, and all the links between them.
Yeah.
But they're not showing how the brain learned and how the brain actually built those structures. And this also means, though, that when you use this model, this brain, you can look inside it and you can see what makes it light up. So maybe you can interpret what the brain has learned. So if you think about, does this model understand a certain word or a certain ideology, you can try and understand whether that model has learnt that, but only if it's open weight. So you cannot do that for these big AI company models like ChatGPT, Gemini.
Yeah, we see a lot of these research labs that are trying to understand and interpret what the models are doing, and they draw a lot of parallels from neuroscience, don't they? So it's kind of like looking at that artificial brain.
Yes, exactly.
Through a similar lens.
Yeah, and another type of open sourcing, or how open these language models can be, is whether the company released the training code. So it's one thing to release the structure of the brain, but it's another thing to release the way that brain was created. So one intuition here is, we're told that ChatGPT just predicts the next word, but there are actually many ways you can do this in different settings.
Lots of tricks.
Yeah, I think a good example is how to give the model certain values. So some people might have heard of RLHF, so reinforcement learning human feedback. So this is where you have humans actually correcting the next word predictions.
Yeah, and it has a very big impact, doesn't it?
Exactly. So that needs to be put into the open source and how it was trained.
Got you.
And lastly, the big one is open dataset. So this is actually whether the company will release the exact data that the model is learning to predict the next word on. And this is really important because, I don't know if you've ever written a book, but if you care about copyright law, if all the models open source their dataset, then you can actually see exactly whether your book is in there, and you can file the complaint or the royalties and things. But practically, because these data sets are so big, you actually don't really see the exact data set be released, but more of a summary, and we call this a data card.
Maybe with all the copyright lawsuits that these big tech companies are in, that's one of the reasons why they're not releasing a fully open source and open data and go more towards the open weights.
Yeah. So what does this mean practically today? Well, when a model is open weight, it means you can actually download it onto your local machine, your laptop, and run it yourself. And the important thing here is that all the data that you give the model stays on your machine, and it's not going off to some big server. So when you use ChatGPT, it's on a website, the model's not running on your machine, and everything you say is going to their database and they're training on it and things. So that's what it definitely means. But what might it mean, and what's exciting in terms of building more trust in language models, is that it can offer much better regulation of the models. So because anyone can download it, you can have these big third parties that can download the model and do lots of the state-of-the-art experiments to see exactly what it learned. And maybe we can see if certain ideologies are embedded in different LLMs. And then as a user of this technology, you can make an informed decision on which one you want to use and which ones you might not want to use.
Got you, yeah. So a lot of the regulation and testing is all internal at the moment, isn't it? So basically kind of allowing third parties to do that completely unbiasedly.
Yeah, exactly. So open sourcing is a bit like the back of the food packet.
And yeah, like Riku was saying, there are kind of different definitions and to different extents, but there are two main frameworks that are used within the industry that are kind of the go-to that most people commonly accept as whether it's classed as open source or not. And one is from the Open Source Initiative, which is nicely named. That's
straight from the source.
Exactly, yeah. God. And that's a global non-profit, which is basically completely dedicated to empowering open collaboration, transparency, and innovation. So it's from 1998, so a lot of it was around early software, and they now do work with AI. But there are 10 kind of key points to the framework, but just two interesting ones from a sort of legal perspective that I thought I'd mention were free redistribution, which basically means that, if a company open sources and lets you access that model, you can do what you want with it from a redistribution perspective. So you could give it away for free, like they have, but within a kind of bigger piece of software. You could sell it as a product kind of wrapped within other stuff. So that's kind of down to your discretion. Another point is that they also must allow you to modify the product and the model. So that's called derived work. So you can then go and tweak it and play with it and possibly make it better as well, which is one thing we see a lot in the open source community. Fine tune it, so make it better at a particular task, for example. So all of that is fair play as well under most of these frameworks. And the other main framework is from the Linux Foundation, and that's their model openness framework. And this actually came out in 2024 and was more aimed at chatbots and LLMs and AI. They list a few key things which need to be released by the company for it to be classed as open source, and that is the model architecture, so exactly how that piece of machine learning looks, so the brain itself, how it's structured, the model parameters, so like Rick was just discussing then, exactly the kind of weights and numbers within that brain that make it work and tick, a technical report so that someone can actually understand how it was built and what it's doing, so you don't just get the code and you have to figure it out on your own. And also an evaluation of the results. So someone has then tested the model, looked at how well it does on certain things, and they release those evaluation results. And lastly, this thing called a data card. So Rick was just saying that often the data sets are far too big to actually release in their entirety. So a data card allows you to release a summary of all of the different things and aspects of the data set, but without releasing every single bit of that data. So we know exactly what goes into it, but maybe just a kind of percentage. And open sourcing has been around for some time, like we can see from the Open Source Initiative from 1998. People have been thinking about releasing software and making it freely available for some time, but that wasn't always the case in the early days of chatbots and LLMs. But what we're seeing recently in the past kind of couple of years is that there's much more of a shift in the industry to open source models from these big tech companies. Albeit it may not be their best performing models or the one that you go online and interact with when you go to ChatGPT, but nonetheless, it's some form of their technology that they're releasing and showing to the public. And this was really kicked off by DeepSeek, the Chinese startup, when they released their best performing model that kind of rivaled ChatGPT. They just straight up released that out to the public for you to go and look at how it was built, how it works, the weights in the model, even though you couldn't go and run it yourself, but they kind of let the public look inside the box, and that really changed the paradigm. And we've seen OpenAI have now started to actually become open, as their name has implied for so long, even though they've never really open sourced their good models. They're releasing some really useful and powerful open source models now. Their GPT-OSS, which came out in August this year. XAI are releasing some of their Grok models now, open source, and some of the latest ones that Apple actually launched, an open source small vision model, which you can go and run in your browser, which I tried the other day. It was kind of crazy. But yeah, so we're seeing this shift now, which is really nice, and we just need to push and kind of put more emphasis on them doing this.
Nice. So that leads us to the next part, which is what can and what should you do? So I think to lead this off, there's a common rule or like an idea that open source models, the best ones kind of lag about 3 months after the state-of-the-art closed source ones. But we're getting to the point where the models are so good now that you might not need a model that can solve a crazy maths problem for your therapy advice.
Yeah, or proofing your email.
Yeah, exactly. Or proofing your email. So yeah, definitely ask yourself, maybe an open model is good enough.
Or maybe even as well, you're happy to kind of compromise ever so slightly at the sake of what we're about to discuss, which is kind of personal privacy as well.
Yeah, exactly. So those privacy gains might also save you about £20 a month for those online memberships,
nice.
But it will cost you in terms of the hardware. So there's a general recommendation that you should have 1.2 times the size of the model as RAM memory. So
Okay.
if a model's got is 10 gigabytes big, you need about 12 gigabytes of RAM to run it.
And so RAM, I think my laptop has like 8 to 16 or something. Is that of gigabytes?
That's pretty
RAM,
normal
isn't it?
these days. Yeah.
Which is not the storage, is it? When you say your iPhone has like 125 gigs of storage, it's the smaller one that's the active memory.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of the memory that the computer can like
Access there and then.
Yes. Yeah, and thankfully, this recent model that OpenAI released, GPT OSS, the 20 billion parameter model,
Sounds
it
big.
needs about 16 gigabytes. So you might be able to run it on your local machine.
Yeah, 20 billion parameters, which again, size of the brain, does sound very big. But the scary thing is, again, with a lot of these open source models, the state-of-the-art models, which they don't actually release the exact number of parameters that they have, but it's estimated that the latest ones now, the state-of-the-arts, are in the number of the kind of trillions.
Oh, wow.
So that means that this GPT OSS, which is a very good open source model that you can run on your laptop, is only 2% the size of the big boys. So
yeah, that really puts into perspective, doesn't it? How much energy these big ones must be using. But speaking of how quick can they run on your machine, so it does depend on a whole host of things, but it's found to be about 30 tokens a second, which is about 25 words or so a second. But just for reference, the average reading speed is about 3 to 5 words per second, so it's way
perfect.
faster than you can read. And if you're a skim reader, you can get about 15 to 20 words per second, but still, it's faster than that.
I always skip to the end though and just read the end bit. So how do I do that if it's?
Well, you have to wait, my friend. But
so it sounds as though for a lot of these open source models that you can just run locally, we're not even discussing the ones that you could go and pay some cloud hosting service like Amazon's AWS to kind of run a slightly bigger model. So just the ones you can run on your laptop, they could probably do a lot of the stuff as quick as you need it to for kind of these day-to-day tasks that people may be using ChatGPT or Gemini for on a daily basis several times in a day. So
yeah. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows, so you're still going to have to pick your poison at the end of the day. So you have to choose to use a slightly less performant model.
Which company you want the model from as well.
Yeah, and even these open source models aren't immune to bias. Someone had to train them.
Yeah.
And ideally, you can look inside them depending on how open they are, and it can at least give you some transparency.
Yeah.
So I think the core message here is think about who's releasing the models, who can you trust, and it's important to make a conscious effort of which chatbot you use today. So hopefully we demystified that landscape of transparency in these AI models and how to gain trust.
So yeah, I think just to finally wrap up then, I think transparency is very clearly a huge piece of the puzzle with trust and being able to really trust these companies with our data, using their tools every day. So I think if we as users really push for open source and demand it from these companies, that can really help with this trust. And I saw this nice quote that kind of gives us a sense of urgency with this, which is that trust is like a piece of paper. Once it's crumpled, it can never be perfect again. So I think the message there is that we need to act now before these companies potentially do something that causes distrust or they take a wrong step. I think if they start and set the precedent with open sourcing and being very transparent, that can help set the precedent moving forward. And we can really trust these companies that are now influencing our day-to-day lives.
So that's a clear call to action. So thank you all so much for listening, and we'll catch you next time.